Hey, welcome back to DZ's Daily Devotions. What are we doing here? We're reading the Bible in 1 year. That is right. We're reading the whole Bible in 365 days. Yes, we are doing it, and we are doing it together. Today, we're picking up in Leviticus chapter 4, verse 1, and we're reading until chapter 5, verse 19. Let's get started. Chapter 4, Procedures for the Sin Offering. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Give the following instructions to the people of Israel. This is how you are to deal with those who sin unintentionally by doing anything that violates one of the Lord's commands. If the high priest sins, bring guilt upon the entire community. He must give a sin offering for the sin he committed. He must present the Lord a young bull with no defects. He must bring the bull to the Lord at the entrance of the tabernacle, lay the hand on the heads of the bull, and slaughter it before the Lord. The high priest will then take some of the bull's blood into the tabernacle, dip his finger into the blood, and sprinkle it 7 times before the Lord in front of the inner curtain of the sanctuary. The priest will then put some of the blood on the horns of the altar for fragrance incense that stands in the Lord's presence inside the tabernacle. He will pour the rest of the blood of the bull's blood at the base of the altar for burnt offering at the entrance of the tabernacle. Then the priest must remove all the fat from the bull to be offered as sin offering. This includes all the fat around the internal organs, 2 kidneys, and the fat around the near of the loins. The lobe of the liver he must remove all along the kidneys, just as he does the cattle of offering as a peace offering, and burn them on the altar of burnt offerings. But he must take whatever is left of the bull, its hide, meat, head, legs, internal organs, and dung, and carry it away to a place outside the camp that is ceremonially clean, a place where the ashes are dumped. There, on the ash heap, he will burn it into a wood fire. If the entire Israelite community sins violate one of the Lord's commands, but the people don't realize it, they are still guilty. When they become aware of their sin, the people must bring a young bull as an offering for their sin and present it before the tabernacle. The elders of the community must then lay their hand on the bull's head and slaughter it before the Lord. The high priest will then take some of the bull's blood into the tabernacle, dip his finger in the blood, and sprinkle it 7 times before the Lord in front of the inner curtain. He will then put some of the blood on the horns of the altar for fragrance incense that stands in the Lord's presence inside the tabernacle. He will pour the rest of the blood at the base of the altar for burnt offering at the entrance of the tabernacle. Then the priest must remove all the animal's fat and burn it on the altar, just as he does with the bull offered as a sin for the high priest. Through this process, the priest purify the people, making them right with the Lord, and they will be forgiven. Then the priest must take what is left of the bull and carry it outside the camp and burn it there, just as he had done in the sin offering for the high priest. This offering is for sin of the entire congregation of Israel. If one of the Israel leaders sins by violating one of the commands of the Lord, his God doesn't realize it, he is still guilty. But when he is aware of the sin, he must bring his offering, a male goat with no defects. He must lay the hand on the goat's head and slaughter at the place where the burnt offerings are slaughtered before the Lord. This is an offering for his sin. Then the priest will dip his finger in the blood of the sin offering and put it on the horns of the altar for burnt offerings. He will pour the rest of the blood at the base of the altar. Then he must burn all the goat's fat on the altar, just as he does with the peace offering. Through this process, the priest will purify the leader from his sin, making him right with the Lord, and he will be forgiven. If any common people sin by violating one of the Lord's commands, and they don't realize it, they are still guilty. When they become aware of their sin, they must bring an offering for the sin, a female goat with no defects. They must lay a hand on the head of the sin offering and slaughter it at the place where the burnt offerings are slaughtered. Then the priest will dip his finger in the blood and pour it on the horns of the altar for burnt offerings. He will pour the rest of the blood at the base of the altar, then remove the goat's fat, just as he does with the fat of the peace offering. He will burn the fat on the altar and the pleasing the aroma for the Lord. In this process, the priest will purify the people, making them right with the Lord, and they will be forgiven. If the people bring a sheep as their sin offering, and as a female with no defects, they must lay a hand on the head of the sin offering, slaughter it, place it as the burnt offerings are slaughtered. Then the priest will dip his fingers of the blood of the sin offering and put it on the horns of the altar for burnt offerings. He will pour out the rest of the blood at the base of the altar. Then remove the sheep's fat, just as he does with the fat of the sheep presented as a peace offering. He will burn the fat at the altar on top of special gifts presented to the Lord. Through this process, the priest will purify the people for their sin, making them right with the Lord, and they will be forgiven. Chapter 5. Sins requiring a sin offering. If you are called to testify about something you have seen and you know about, it is sinful to refuse to testify, and you will be punished for your sin. Or suppose you unknowingly touch something and ceremonially unclean, and as the carcass of an unclean animal, and you realize what you have done, you must admit your defilement and your guilt. This is true whether it is a wild animal, a domestic animal, or an animal that scurries along the ground. Or suppose you unknowingly touch something that makes a person unclean. When you realize what have you done, you must admit your guilt. Or suppose you make a foolish vow of any kind, whether its purpose is good or for bad. When you realize its foolishness, you admit your guilt. When you become aware of your guilt in any of these ways, you must confess your sin. Then you bring to the Lord as penalty for your sin a female from the flock, either a sheep or a goat. This is the sin offering, which the priest will purify you from your sin, making you right with the Lord. But if you cannot afford to bring a sheep, then you may bring to the Lord 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons as a penalty for your sin. One of the birds will be for sin offering and the other for a burnt offering. You must bring them to the priest, who will present the first bird as a sin offering. He will wring its neck without severing its head from the body. Then he will sprinkle some of the blood on the sin offering against the sides of the altar, and the rest of the blood will be drained at the base of the altar. This is the offering for the sin. Then the priest will prepare the second bird as a burnt offering, followed all the procedures that have been prescribed. Though this process for the priest will purify you from your sin, making you right with the Lord, and you will be forgiven. If you cannot afford to bring 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons, you may bring 2 quarts of choice flour for your sin offering. Since it is an offering for sin, you must not moisten it with olive oil or put any frankincense on it. Take the flour to the priest, who will scoop out a handful or represent portion and burn it on the altar for special gifts presented to the Lord. It is an offering for sin. Through this process, the priest will purify those who are guilty of these sins, making them right with the Lord, and they'll be forgiven. The rest of the flour will belong to the priest, just as a grain offering. Procedures for the guilt offering. Then the Lord said to Moses, if you commit a sin and intentionally defiling the Lord's sacred property, you must bring a guilt offering to the Lord. Your offering must be your own ram with no defects, or you may buy one equal value with silver as measured by the weight of a sanctuary shekel. And you must make retribution for your sacred property you have harmed by paying for your loss, plus an additional 20%. When you give the payment to the priest, he will purify you with the ram sacrificed as a guilt offering, making you right with the Lord, and you will be forgiven. Suppose this sin violates the Lord's commands and you are unaware of what you have done, you are guilty and you will be punished for your sin. For a guilt offering, you must bring the priest your own ram with no defects, or you may buy one with equal value. Though this process, the priest will purify you from your unintentional sin, making you right with the Lord, and you will be forgiven. This is a guilt offering, for you have been guilty of an offense against the Lord. So that's where we're leaving off in Leviticus today. Let's go ahead and move on to Mark. We are in Mark chapter 2, verse 13, and we're reading until chapter 3, verse 6. Jesus calls Matthew. Then Jesus went to the lakeshore again and taught the crowds where they were coming to him. As he walked along, he saw Levi, son of Leviticus, sitting at the tax collector's booth. Follow me, my disciple, Jesus said to him. So Levi got up and followed him. Later, Levi invited Jesus and his disciples to his home as dinner guests, along with many tax collectors and other disreputable sinners. But then when the teachers of religious law who were the Pharisees, saw him eating with tax collectors and other sinners, they asked his disciples, why does he eat with such scum? When Jesus heard this, he told them, healthy people don't need a doctor, sick people do. I have come to call to those who think they are righteous, but those who know they are sinners. A discussion about fasting. Once John's disciples and the Pharisees were fasting, some of the people came to Jesus and asked, why don't your disciples fast like John's disciples and the Pharisees do? Jesus replied, do wedding guests fast while celebrating with the groom? Of course not. They can't fast while the groom is with them, but someday the groom will be taken away from them and they will fast. Besides, who would patch old clothing with new cloth? For the new patch would shrink and rip away from the old cloth, leaving an even bigger tear than before. And no one puts new wine into an old wineskin, for the wine would burst out of the wineskin, the wine and the skins both would be lost. New wine calls for new wineskins. A discussion about the Sabbath. One Sabbath day, as Jesus was walking through some grain fields, his disciples began breaking off heads of grain to eat. But the Pharisees said to Jesus, look, why are you breaking the law by harvesting grain on the Sabbath? Jesus said to them, haven't you ever read the scriptures of what David did when he and his companions were hungry? He went to the house of God and broke the law by eating sacred loaves of bread that only the priests are allowed to eat. He also gave some to his companions. Then Jesus said to him, the Sabbath was made to meet people of needs, and not the people to meet requirements of the Sabbath. So lend the man of the Lord even over the Sabbath. Chapter 3. Jesus heals on the Sabbath. Jesus went to the synagogue again and noticed a man with a deformed hand. Since it was the Sabbath, Jesus' enemies watched him closely. If he healed the man's hand, then he planned to accuse him of working on the Sabbath. Jesus said to the man with the deformed hand, come and stand in front of everyone. Then he turned to his critics and asked, does the law permit good deeds on the Sabbath, or is it a day for doing evil? Is this a day to save life or destroy it? But they wouldn't answer him. He looked around at them angrily and was deeply saddened by their hearts. Then he said to the man, "Hold out your hand." So the man held out his hand, and it was restored. At once the Pharisees went away and met with the supporters of Herod to plot how to kill Jesus. So we're going to leave off there. Let's go ahead and move on to Psalms. We are reading Psalm 36. Psalm 36. Sin whispers to the wicked deep within their hearts. They have no fear of God at all, and they're blind conceit. They cannot see how wicked they really are. Everything they say is crooked and deceitful. They refuse to act wisely or do good. They lie awake at night, hatching sinful plots. Their actions are never good. They make no attempt to turn from evil. Your unfailing love, O Lord, is as vast as the heavens. Your faithfulness reaches beyond the clouds. Your righteousness is like a mighty mountain. Your justice like the ocean depths. You care for your people and animals alike, O Lord. How precious your unfailing love, O Lord. All humanity finds shelter in the shadow of your wings. You feed them from abundance of your own house, letting them drink from the river of your delights. For you are the fountain of life, the light by which we see. Pour out your unfailing love on those who love you. Give justice to those with honest hearts. Don't let them trample me, or the wicked push me around. Look, those who do evil have fallen. They are thrown to the ground, never to rise again. So we're going to leave off there. Let's go ahead and finish it out today in Proverbs. We're in Proverbs chapter 10, and we're reading verses 1 and 2. The Proverbs of Solomon. A wise child brings joy to a father. A foolish child brings grief to a mother. Tainted wealth has no lasting value, but right living can save your life. So that has been day 48. 48 days straight of DZ's daily devotions where we're reading the Bible in 365 years. Hallelujah. Amen to that. So glad that you guys can be with me on this journey. Man, it makes me happy. Before you leave, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to this video and hit that bell button for notifications and when my videos come out. And thank you for supporting me and making this all possible at www.patreon.com/YoungNemo. And I'm going to leave a link in the description for that. And I'll catch you on day 49.